afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio is Deputy First Minister Responsibilities, Economy and Gaelic. I would remind members that questions 5 and 7 are grouped together and that I'll take any supplementaries on these questions after both have been answered. And at question number 1, I call Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to encourage businesses to implement the real living wage in light of reports that Scotland's level of real living wage employers is proportionately 5 times that of the UK as a whole.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
The Scottish Government has a long-term funding partnership with Living Wage Scotland to support the rollout of the Real Living Wage Accreditation Scheme, which has seen the number of accredited employers increase from 14 in 2014 to over 4,000 today, with at least 72,000 workers in Scotland receiving a pay rise as a direct result of their employer accrediting. This has made Scotland the best performing of all the 4 UK nations on the highest proportion of workers 18 and up paid the real living wage or more at a level now of 88.7% against the UK average of 85.4%.
Marie McNair.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The payment of the living wage is a huge step forward in tackling in-work poverty. Will the Minister join me in acknowledging the businesses in Clydebank and Milngavie who are paying the living wage? Furthermore, businesses are looking to the UK budget on the horizon, and last time Labour hammered the businesses. Will the Minister join with me in calling for a budget that reverses Labour's previous punitive approach? Minister.
Can I join Mary McNair in acknowledging those businesses in Clydebank and Milngavie that are paying the living wage? Of course, in this day and age with the cost of living, it's more important than ever before. And the member quite rightly highlights the importance of the UK budget, not only on workers' wages, but also on employers as well, because the less money they have, the more difficult it is for them to pay perhaps higher wages than they would wish to see. And therefore, national insurance contributions and other measures are very important as part of this debate as well, and the Scottish Government continues to try and have the best engagement possible with the UK Government on this, which is not always the easiest to do, and the UK Treasury perhaps could be a lot more helpful with that engagement. And of course, we'll continue to apply pressure on the UK Government in the run-up to the UK budget.
Supplementary, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The latest data actually shows that the number of people receiving the real living wage in Scotland is in decline and has been for years. In 2022, the figure was 90.6%. It's now dropped to 88.6%. The figures are going downwards, not upwards. So rather than congratulate themselves, will the Scottish Government actually take some action to support businesses who want to employ people, pay them the real living wage, but are struggling to do so at the moment due to SNP policies?
Minister.
Well, as I said in my initial answer, the number of accredited employers has increased from 14 in 2014 to over 4,000 today, and 72,000 workers benefit from that. And we will continue to support the living wage agenda, which I think the Conservative Party have not always been the most enthusiastic about, so perhaps it's a bit ironic they're calling for more people to get a real living wage when it's not necessarily a policy they've supported in the past. So it's important that the UK budget and indeed Scottish Government measures as well continues to support promoting the real living wage.
Question number 2, Jamie Halker-Johnson.
The Scottish Government, what economic assessment is undertaken of the potential impact of proposed workers' camps in and around communities across the Highlands and Islands?
Minister.
I am aware that a number of applications have been submitted to the Highland Council for accommodation for temporary workers. Primary responsibility for determining planning applications rests with the Council as a planning authority. The Scottish Government has not undertaken any separate economic assessment of these proposals. However, applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. It would not be appropriate, of course, for the Scottish Government to comment on live or proposed planning applications.
Jamie Halker-Johnson.
Last month, the application for one of 2 proposed worker accommodation sites near Broadford on Skye was withdrawn, but new locations are now being considered, and a 450-bed site is still proposed for Asheg. Only last year, Kate Forbes rightly said, it is absolutely vital that big corporations do not just steamroll in and then steamroll out again, leaving locals with nothing but memories of disruption, devastation and anger. But that's exactly what's happening, not just on Skye, but right across the Highlands and Islands, where massive energy infrastructure projects, steamrolled through by ministers and officials here in Edinburgh, are leaving local communities paying the price for SNP targets on renewables. So can I ask the Minister, is the Scottish Government aware of the locations being considered as an alternative to the now withdrawn Torrin Road site? And how will Scottish ministers ensure the interests of local businesses are protected and local community concerns hold?
Minister.
Well, in terms of the proposal in Ashig, I would hope that the planning authorities, of course, are ensuring there's proper engagement between the applicant and the communities, and they're fulfilling their role as well. That is a planning process that's in place and should be followed. And in terms of rolling out infrastructure to promote renewables in the Highlands, I think it's something that's very important to future economic well-being of the Highlands and Islands. I read a book called The Hydro Boys by Emma Wood, I think it was, a few years ago, which was about the rollout of hydroelectricity in the Highlands, and I wonder if the Conservative Party would have opposed that at the time as well, bringing electricity to the people living there. But in terms of these massive infrastructure projects, there are occasions where temporary accommodation is required, and of course that's why the planning process is there, to make sure all voices are heard and that the planning applications are dealt with appropriately.
A supplementary, Daniel Johnson.
As alluded to in the Minister's answer, many of Scotland's biggest economic opportunities are in its most remote places. One of the ideas contained in Professor Anton Muscatelli's report on regional economic growth last week was that we needed strategic master plans which would address some of the legacy issues asked by Jamie Halcrow-Johnson. Is it time to look at measures such as that to make sure that we have lasting legacy and infrastructure such as housing when we have investments such as described?
Minister.
Always open to new ideas, and of course there's a major economic transformation underway in the Highlands at the moment that's going to create many good paid good jobs across the whole of that part of the country. And in terms of the report, of course, we're always open, as I say, to new ideas, but there are many issues where we do not have control in this Parliament, such as transmission charges and other factors that influence how these major infrastructures are rolled out across the country, and indeed the community benefits that are related to that in the first place as well. So, in theory, of course, that's something we'd always want to support, but we don't have all the tools in the box we require to make sure it's properly done.
Question number 3, Edward Myton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much in total has been paid from the public purse to Ferguson Marine since the award of the contracts for both the Glen Sannox and the Glen Rosa.
Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes.
Contract payments from CMAL to Ferguson Marine Engineering Limited, or FMEL, for the Glen Sannox and Glen Rosa were £83.3 million. The Scottish Government loaned £45 million to FMEL prior to its administration. And then since the nationalisation of Ferguson's to September 2025, the Scottish Government has provided £152.1 million for Glen Sannox and £143.8 million for Glen Rosa.
Edward Myton.
Well, Presiding Officer, that's really selective use of the figures. If we're actually talking about it, we know how much money has been paid. I mean, CMAL told me the other day that £450 million had been paid, but I think by the time you've got the loans added in and the non-recoverable expenses, it's close to £700 million. So if you take off the true cost of the ferries at £120 million each, that leaves you £580 million. If you gave each of the workers there £1 million, that would leave you £280 million, which would allow you to order another 6 ferries for CMAL. Surely that would have made better sense than the investment that the government's made at the moment.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, in terms of the figures, I obviously gave him the list, the breakdown of the figures that have been provided, and I think if he adds them up, he'll recognise the figure as being the accepted figure. And I think I tried to do my quick calculations while he was speaking, but it sounds like the similar figure to the CMAL one that he mentioned. So I think it's a bit unfair suggesting that that's selective. But in terms of the approach that we took, ultimately the approach that we took was to ensure that the 2 vessels were delivered for the islanders, and that secondly we safeguarded the yard for the future, and we have protected the jobs at the yard, and I think that was critical, and that is precisely why the government stepped in.
Supplementary, Willie Rennie.
And not one word through that answer of apology for the hundreds of millions of pounds that have been spent on these 2 ferries that are late for the islanders and have embarrassed the workers because of the leadership of the Scottish Government. Not one word of apology. But can the Deputy First Minister tell us, has there been any further consideration of the repeated calls for it someday to pay the price for this disaster. Is any minister finally going to resign for this?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I'm more than happy, in light of Willie Rennie's request, to repeat, as I have previously said from this desk in the chamber, to repeat my apology to all the islanders who have not been able to access a sustainable route because of the two vessels' delay and being over budget.
Question number 4, Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its engagement with the Financial Conduct Authority and other organisations regarding the impact on policyholders of the withdrawal of the Family Protection Plan by Sea Mutual and Maiden-like First Cheque Rings.
Minister.
The Scottish Government has engaged with the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, who have confirmed they are working with relevant parties to understand the background to this decision and the options for replacement cover. Their priority is ensuring consumers are appropriately informed and have sufficient opportunity to consider options. The FCA are also examining the conduct of firms against their requirements, and any decision to intervene will be guided by their statutory objectives and enforcement principles. The Scottish Government will continue to work with stakeholders to understand the implications for credit unions and their members.
Richard Leonard.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? Thousands of people, mostly elderly, some very elderly, have been abandoned and left in funeral poverty. Some of them join us in the public gallery today. Each of them took out this funeral policy and paid into it in good faith, many for over 20 years, so that they could die with the dignity of knowing their families would not face huge bills. Meanwhile, the greedy directors of the insurance broker Sea Mutual have looted over £3 million in dividends over the last 5 years. So will the Minister join me today in urgently pressing the Financial Conduct Authority to take out a Section 166 order under the Financial Services Act, and will the Government continue its dialogue with the coalition of UK credit unions until all of those affected by this scandal secure justice?
Minister.
Richard Leonard's.
Minister, could you resume your seat a second? Can I say to our guests in the gallery, you're so very welcome here, but we actually don't really encourage clapping simply because we're in the middle of our parliamentary process. But you're most welcome to observe our proceedings. Thank you for your understanding. Minister.
Richard Leonard outlines a very serious situation. And can I just say the Scottish Government and Ministers share his concerns that he's eloquently outlined to the Chamber, and indeed I'd add his welcome to the visitors in the Chamber who are facing this awful predicament at the moment. It's a very distressing time for the policyholders, especially as we approach winter as well, and I am very much aware of the serious issues we're discussing today. Yesterday, the Finance Secretary and myself had a very productive meeting with Elaine Ray, the Chief Executive Officer of NHS Credit Union, who tells me she represents 14 credit unions in Scotland, I believe, and also she was joined, of course, by Paul Sweeney, MSP, who is the Deputy Convener of the Cross-Party Group on Credit Unions. And that was a valuable meeting and very helpful from the point of view of ministers as well to understand the issues. And, of course, if I have an opportunity to say hello to some of the members in the gallery after this session, I'll take that opportunity as well. We will continue to put pressure on the FCA. Of course, it's a reserved issue to the UK Government, and I should also add that the Finance Secretary is writing to the UK Ministers about this issue as well. And we will, of course, do all we can to make sure that policyholders are not left in the lurch, and those responsible fulfil their obligations, as I know members would like to see happen across the Chamber, I expect. It's a very important issue and it's causing a lot of distress, and that was very well expressed by Elaine Ray when we met her yesterday, and we'll continue to stand up for the policyholders.
Supplementary Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Minister if there's any more that can be said about what the Scottish Government's work with stakeholders to ensure that all those affected receive clear information and reparation about their options and have the appropriate support that they require?
Minister.
Well, of course, a number of options, I understand, are being explored just now by various parties involved in this debacle, and we are very keen for, of course, all policyholders to be kept up to date with those options once they become a bit clearer. As I said before, the FCA is reserved to the UK Government, but we will continue to have a dialogue with the FCA and to press home that very, very important point. And we will also continue to engage with stakeholders in Scotland so we can stay abreast of their concerns as the situation develops over the coming weeks.
Supplementary, Paul Sweeney.
Deputy Presiding Officer, and I welcome the meeting with the Minister yesterday. It was very productive. But can I press on the urgency of the timescale? We've got 12 days until people are left cut off. We need urgent action. Will the Minister confirm that the Government will write to the FCA pressing on the need for the 166 order to be served before the policy expires at the end of the month? And also, will he give a timescale on convening that working group with the Credit Union Coalition so we can work collaboratively to ensure that people aren't left particularly vulnerable at this time of year? Thank you.
Minister.
Absolutely, we'll continue to press the FCA to take appropriate and tough action to make sure that policyholders are not left in the lurch. And in terms of our engagement with the stakeholders, that, of course, will continue as well. I think the meeting we had yesterday was very productive, and I thank Paul Sweeney for his role in making sure that meeting happened quickly. But we do recognise the urgency of this issue as well, and I hope he gauged from the Finance Secretary's comments that she also recognises that there's a short-term challenge as well. I notice the Finance Secretary just entered the chamber. So these issues have been taken very, very seriously.
Question number 5, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with the UK Government regarding the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Pride in Place programme.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, there has been a concerning lack of engagement from the UK Government on the Pride in Place programme and the Local Growth Fund, which is replacing the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Despite a clear commitment from UK Government ministers at the start of the year to engage meaningfully on new funding programmes, we've still been given no details on the funding and delivery, although the Welsh Government were given significant clarity and responsibility for funding over a month ago. That is completely unacceptable. My colleague Shona Robison has raised this point. I too have raised this point, and it would be really nice to get some clarity.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Minister for that reply. When the Pride in Place programme was announced in September, it was described by the UK Labour Government as new funding. We now know that wasn't true. What was sold as new investment in communities is a repackaging of the Shared Prosperity Fund. Not only is there new money, but some areas are worse off than before. Even Glasgow City Council's Labour Group leader was shocked by this. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that Scotland's communities deserve better than this sleight of hand from an increasingly desperate and chaotic UK Labour Government?
Deputy First Minister.
It will come as no surprise. I agree wholeheartedly. Communities are the beating heart of Scotland, key to anchoring local wealth and creating resilient places where people can flourish. And I wrote to the Secretary of State for Scotland following up the communication from Shona Robison to the Treasury that the Pride in Place programme doesn't align with our approach to regeneration, and it's concerning that the UK Government approach will leave many communities and local authorities worse off. I hope that the UK Government recognises the impact of their approach and hope that they rethink.
Question number 7, Claire Hawkey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the UK Government's Pride in Place programme in relation to its impact on devolved issues.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, we of course welcome all investment to Scotland's communities, but on this one it's disappointing that we weren't informed of the Pride in Place plans. We are opposed to the use of the Internal Market Act to fund activity in devolved areas in Scotland. It bypasses democratic scrutiny and accountability and doesn't make best use of public funding. Pride of Place funding for Scotland should have been allocated through the Barnett formula. That would have ensured a clear policy landscape and certainly would have ensured that there wasn't a different approach for the Welsh Government as there was for the Scottish Government.
Claire Hawkey.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer. The Welsh Government have been allocated over £500 million of funding, local growth funding, which they have been told they can manage and distribute. Meanwhile, considerably smaller funding allocations have been made to Scottish local authorities through Pride in Place funding, completely bypassing the devolution settlement. Could the Deputy First Minister advise what actions the Scottish Government is taking to challenge this gross imbalance in the treatment of devolved parliaments?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the last time, of course, that public funding went to one part of the United Kingdom and bypassed the Barnett formula was, of course, in Theresa May's day. And it is very strange that the Welsh Government have received a commitment that they will deliver the Local Growth Fund directly, and we've not even had the opportunity for a meaningful discussion on the delivery of the fund in Scotland. It's worrying to see devolved governments being treated differently, and it does raise significant questions about the politicisation of public funding. The Government has raised this with UK Government ministers, both in writing and in person, and I think there's an opportunity for Parliament to ask some questions too about why the Welsh Government has received their commitment. They will have responsibility for determining how the money is spent, and we don't.
Question number 6, Keith Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on progress with delivery of the Stirling and Clackmannanshire City Region deal.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the Stirling and Clackmannanshire City Region deal, initially estimated to bring £214 million of overall investment, is driving economic growth, productivity and prosperity. To date, over £35 million of the total £90.2 million Scottish and UK Government commitment has been utilised. Progress continues to be made by regional partners across the deal. Employability support is being offered through the Lone Parent and Regional Skills and Inclusion programmes. Innovation continues through the National Aquaculture Technology and Innovation Hub, due to open soon. And work on the Stirling Digital Hub is also underway. And the Regional Joint Committee recently approved business cases for City Park and a digital hub in Callander.
Keith Brown.
The Deputy First Minister for a response. It shall know that the heads of terms for the Stirling and Clackmannanshire City Region deal set out an ambition to unlock over £640 million of private sector investment and deliver more than 5,000 new jobs across the region over its 10 to 15-year lifespan. However, in June, in response to a written question, it was confirmed that private sector investment secured to date stands at just £476,000, with 82 jobs created. In the spirit of supporting delivery and maximising the benefits of this partnership for local communities, can the Deputy First Minister set out how the Scottish Government, working with the UK Government and local partners, intends to accelerate progress, and what revised milestones of performance measures are in place to ensure that communities, and in particular in Clackmannanshire, see the level of investment that the job creation that was originally promised?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, we are committed to working with all the partners to maximise the benefits of the deal. It's now in its 6th year of delivery. COVID-19 obviously delayed initial progress, but funding was reprofiled to safeguard the £90.2 million of government investment. Inflationary pressures have also resulted in us working with partners to ensure that outstanding projects remain viable, and we've been encouraging value engineering where possible and exploring other funding streams. Beyond this, officials from both governments meet the Programme Management Office fortnightly to ensure that momentum is maintained, and that's in addition to annual conversations with all partners to monitor progress. I think the bottom line for Keith Brown's constituents is that we will take on board the queries that he has raised today and ensure that those are taken into account in planning for the future of the deal.
And supplementary, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Deputy First Minister will know that the Stirling and Clackmannanshire deal is a 10-year programme, and we're now operating in almost 6 years of that. The Government promised 5,000 jobs would be created, and in June this year they celebrated and defended the creation of only 82 and claimed that projects were still at an early stage. Does the First Minister really think that 6 years on, people in Stirling and Clackmannanshire will find that explanation anything but disappointing, and what is really needed is real progress and real job opportunities for the people of Stirling and Clackmannanshire?
Deputy First Minister.
Alexander Stewart, in the spirit of his question, that we do want to see as rapid progress as possible. I think growth deals are a very unique way of delivering economic prosperity in Scotland because of that tripartite approach. So there's obviously the UK Government, Scottish Government and local government. And there's an opportunity for all of us to try and accelerate progress, because ultimately we know that the money has been committed, the money is protected, it will be spent. We want to ensure that it delivers as many jobs as possible, and so we will work on a cross-government basis to ensure that that's done.
Question number 8, Polly McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taken to improve Glasgow City's regional economy in the light of the economic effect of the COVID-19 lockdown on the city.
Deputy First Minister.
Glasgow celebrates its 850th anniversary, we continue our support across numerous initiatives to improve regional economic growth. Our £500 million commitment to the successful Glasgow City Region deal has delivered the new Govan-Partick Bridge and Sighthill M8 crossing, and will continue to invest in projects for another 10 years. We transferred leadership of Clyde Mission to regional partners, an issue I know that Pauline McNeill is very interested in. That was alongside £26.5 million of funding. And this year we've committed a further £2 million towards engineering and maritime skills. We also established the investment zone in partnership with UK Government and are actively working with partners to identify opportunities for further regional empowerment.
Pauline McNeill.
Anton Muscatelli, in the report already mentioned on regional economic development, said that Greater Manchester, a city of comparable size, has been more successful than Glasgow in growing its economy. Now, Glasgow's had many successes, as the Deputy First Minister has alluded to, but Glasgow City Centre has struggled to recover from the pandemic. In May, the footfall was 7% lower than in May 2019 before COVID hit. And added to that, if you think about the ways that people need to get into the city, Glasgow now has one of the highest parking charges in Europe. So given the ongoing challenges with reduced footfall and the impacts had on businesses, what specific action can the Scottish Government take to encourage the increase in visitor numbers to support business?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I think we all want to see every part of Scotland perform as successfully as possible and be as prosperous as possible. I engaged just a week ago or so with the Delivery Board for Glasgow, the Economic Delivery Board for Glasgow, where Pauline McNeill will know there is representation from the university sector as well as businesses and local leadership. And we're very keen to work with them to deliver on their ambitions for Glasgow. Obviously, the point around Manchester is frequently raised, and it's my reflection that in terms of Manchester, what they have excelled at is being able to deliver quickly in terms of planning and so on, and that secondly, their reputation now precedes them everywhere we go, considering we're talking about them a lot. So I think there's some good learning there in terms of how to support all parts of Scotland, and sometimes it doesn't require as much structural change as we think to unlock that economic prosperity.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on Deputy First Minister responsibilities, economy and Gaelic. There will be a very short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to change position should they so wish. And I'm not seeing anybody moving, so we'll go straight into the portfolio, which is finance and local government. At question number 1, I call Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how the new Scottish aggregates tax, due to be introduced in April 2026, will contribute to creating a circular economy.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Scottish aggregates tax will form part of the Scottish Government's broader support for the circular economy agenda and drive towards net zero. It will complement other measures to promote circular construction practices and is intended to help encourage the minimum necessary use of primary aggregates, maximise the use of recycled and secondary alternatives and incentivise innovation in alternative materials.
Maurice Golden.
Thank the Minister for that answer, but will the Minister commit to utilising public procurement to support the uptake of recycled aggregates, and if so, what are the plans around this?
Minister.
Well, the member will be aware that Scotland's got a very proactive approach to public sector procurement. The information we publish on that is quite extensive, and the tracking of performance against the government's objectives is quite thorough. Net zero is, of course, one of the drivers as part of our procurement activity, and if there's anything the member wants to follow up on that, I'm very happy to discuss it with them, but he can rest assured that we use all the levers at our disposal, including procurement, to help us deliver on the Scottish Government's circular economy and net zero objectives.
Question number 2, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is being provided to groups and people to make use of the Community Asset Transfer Scheme.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Scottish Government funds a community ownership support service to provide expert asset transfer advice and support for community groups who want to make use of community asset transfer legislation. The Scottish Government also provides financial support through the Scottish Land Fund for communities across Scotland who wish to own and manage land, including asset transfers between 2021 and 2026. Over £32 million has been provided in that regard to 249 organisations.
Phils McGregor.
I thank the Minister for that response. As the Minister knows, I've written it to him already about the current situation for the Airdrie and Coatbridge Harriers, a fantastic local group based at the Coatbridge Outdoor Sports Centre, who for over 30 years have supported thousands of young people across the area. The group recently appealed a decision by the Council to reject their application for a community asset transfer for the sports centre. However, this was rejected as it was out with the agreed timescales. The Minister knows that I find this situation ludicrous because it was the Council in their official letter to the group that the Minister has noted that outlined the timeline for appealing. I therefore find it unacceptable that our policies in this area have no common sense safeguards built into account for situations like this, where honest mistakes are made and groups miss out on real opportunities. So can I ask the Minister what more can he do to support this group, and would his officials be willing to meet with me, the group and the Council to try and find a way forward?
Minister.
I'm aware of the situation that the member raises, and the situation with the Airdrie Harriers asset transfer request is deeply regrettable. I have responded in writing to the member on this. The situation is that the asset transfer legal process must of course be followed by all those involved in the process, including the authority and community organisations, and ministers have no power under that legislation to amend or extend this. The Community Empowerment Act is there to enable groups like Airdrie Harriers realise their aspirations for ownership of local assets. My officials have spoken to North Lanarkshire Council about this regrettable situation so that lessons are learned, and I expect them to do everything in their power to support the group. There is no reason why a solution cannot be found out with the confines of the legislation, and I urge the local authority to work with the Harriers to ensure the continued provision of sporting facilities within the area. I will also write to Jim Logue, leader of North Lanarkshire Council, on this matter, and I am happy to meet with the group if required, subject to my availability.
And supplementary, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. High initial costs like maintenance and insurance, lack of experience and funding are all still major obstacles to community asset transfers taking place. So what are the Scottish Government doing to remove these obstacles and support communities?
Minister.
Well, as I indicated in my earlier answer, the Scottish Government has provided more than £32 million, and that has enabled 249 organisations across the country to take advantage of community asset transfer legislation that was, of course, introduced by this Government. The Government continues to look through our broader work for opportunities to build capacity within local organisations to be able to take advantage of that community asset transfer legislation, and will continue to do so. And I recognise that some groups are going to be more able to take advantage of that than others, and will continue through our engagement with those across the sector to be able to support as best as we can the development of local groups to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
Question number 3, Gordon MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its engagement with the UK Government regarding the upcoming UK budget and any implications for Scotland's public finances.
Cabinet Secretary Shona Robertson.
I wrote to the Chancellor 2 weeks ago seeking an urgent meeting, and the First Minister hoped to meet the Prime Minister, but these have not been agreed to by the UK Government. Clearly, the mixed messages and speculation on what the UK Government may do in their budget has been unhelpful as we consider the implications for our own fiscal position. When I met the Chief Secretary to the Treasury last month, I stressed the importance of speaking to us about the impact of their plans on Scotland and our finances. And I'm very concerned that Scotland, yet again, will be treated as an afterthought.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The UK budget on the 26th of November is a month later than last year. What impact will this have on the Scottish Government's ability to plan effectively for 26-27? And would the Cabinet Secretary agree that Scotland needs greater borrowing powers in order to smooth potential shocks created by the UK budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
The late UK budget means that I'm not able to deliver the Scottish budget until January. The uncertainty and lack of engagement we've seen from the UK Government has also been very unhelpful as we try to anticipate the impact on our own budget. Under the current arrangements, we are managing considerable challenges and volatility with limited powers. It's clear that we need greater fiscal flexibilities to support effective budget management, and I've urged the UK Government to work with us to provide this. And while the Chancellor has not accepted a meeting, I do expect to speak to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury before the budget, and I'll continue to press Scotland's case.
Supplementary, Craig Hoy.
Deputy Presiding Officer. Last year, Labour broke its promise to workers that they would not increase tax by introducing a jobs tax, which has undermined jobs, investment and impacted on growth. Across two of its budgets, the SNP has also broken its manifesto pledge, resulting in what the Auditor General has pointed to as a £1 billion shortfall in the tax take, and also undermined growth in the process. Isn't it the case that both Labour and the SNP have broken their pledge to the Scottish people on tax? And isn't it time that both governments focused on doing the right thing by Scotland, which is to focus on the tax take and not simply increase tax at every opportunity?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, revenues raised from tax are essential for public services, and of course under the Tory plans we would see £1 billion come out of public services because of tax cuts that cannot be afforded. And we've set out our intentions for taxation in our tax strategy. The tax policy for 2026-27 will be announced at the budget on the 13th of January.
Question number 4, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide a response to COSLA's request for additional funding to support local authorities in the forthcoming budget.
Cabinet Secretary.
I welcome the meaningful budget engagement between the Scottish Government and COSLA that has taken place throughout the year, including my meeting with the new COSLA Resources spokesperson at the COSLA conference on Friday the 14th of November. The outcome of the 26-27 local government finance settlement will be announced as part of the Scottish budget on the 13th of January.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. In May this year, the Accounts Commission forecast a £528 million revenue budget gap for 2026-27. As a result, increasingly difficult decisions are being made by councils to meet their legal obligations to balance budgets. In their recent correspondence to the UK Government, COSLA set out the case for additional funding to the Scottish Government to facilitate a sufficient local government settlement, highlighting acute pressures within social care and housing. With the fiscal framework now being published, can the Cabinet Secretary outline how she will work with COSLA to ensure effective delivery of the necessary budget provision, bearing in mind the UK Government has delayed the autumn budget, seriously undermining timescales available for the Scottish Government to publish its budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the Scottish Government does have a long history of working with local authorities and COSLA to make sure council finances are sustainable. So we'll continue to work with our partners in local government in the context of the recently agreed fiscal framework to ensure that the budget challenges facing both spheres of government are properly understood. And despite a decade of UK government austerity measures, the total local government finance settlement increased by almost 50% between 2013-14 and 2025-26. And the Scottish Government will continue to ensure the people of Scotland receive the high-quality public services they expect and deserve.
At question number 5, I call Karen Adam, who's joining us remotely. Ms Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact of the UK fiscal decisions on the Scottish budget and the certainty of local government funding.
Cabinet Secretary.
So we are considering the implications of all possible UK budget outcomes for the Scottish budget, but the lack of any meaningful engagement from the UK Treasury is not helpful. I appreciate this will also have implications for local government, and we have, as I said earlier, a history of working with local authorities and COSLA to make sure council finances are sustainable, and will continue to work with our partners across the public sector to ensure communities across Scotland continue to receive high-quality public services.
Karen Adam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Across my constituency of Banffshire and Buchan Coast, public services are under real pressure, and the Conservative-led administrations in Moray and Aberdeenshire have been making decisions that are harming some of our most vulnerable. while passing the buck to the Scottish Government. Can the Cabinet Secretary set out what multi-year certainty and flexibilities in the next Scottish Budget and the new deal with local government will be available, given late and tightening UK fiscal events, so that my constituents can be confident that regardless of local and UK decisions, the Scottish Government is doing all it can to protect our public services?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I will be setting out the Scottish Budget and the spending review on the 13th of January, and this is being developed against the backdrop of a late and highly uncertain UK Government budget. I can confirm that this budget will protect and build on the substantial investments that this Government has already delivered for the people of Scotland. The Scottish Government will continue to work with our partners across the public sector to provide additional certainty and address any budget challenges, including how we operate and collaborate on reforming public services to ensure sustainable, people-centred services.
Question number 6 has been withdrawn, and at question number 7 I call Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the Scottish Fiscal Commission's recently published Scottish Median Incomes Fact Sheet.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government welcomes the Scottish Fiscal Commission's fact sheet. Their estimates of net median income in 2024-25 and 2025-26 show that a majority of taxpayers are expected to pay less in Scotland than in the rest of the UK. This demonstrates that our commitment to ensure the majority would pay less than elsewhere in the UK is being delivered.
Liz Smith.
Thank you. Well, once again, we have Scottish ministers and repeatedly telling us about their interpretation of forecasts. But just for once, can we have an admission based on what has actually happened? Because for the facts, as presented by both SFC and HMRC for outturn year 2023-24, median Scottish taxpayers paid more than their counterparts in the rest of the UK. So will the Cabinet Secretary finally accept the facts and stop misleading the public?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, let me say again, the SFC fact sheet released on the 11th of November shows that after accounting for deductions to taxable income, most Scottish taxpayers are expected to pay less income tax than they would in the rest of the UK in 2024-25 and 2025-26. Accounting for deductions like pension contributions is required to reflect the tax actually paid by taxpayers, and the fact sheet demonstrates that our commitment to ensure the majority would pay less than elsewhere in the UK is in fact being delivered. And for the remainder of the Parliament, we will maintain the commitment that over half of Scottish taxpayers will pay less income tax than they do in the rest of the UK.
Members, I think when a member has the floor, it is only showing courtesy and respect to actually listen to the member who has the floor. I call supplementary Willie Rennie.
Whatever the interpretation of the figures by the Government, I think the Cabinet Secretary has to accept that many people feel they're paying higher taxes. And secondly, Scotland has got a reputation as a high-tax country with no discernible improvement in public services. Will the Cabinet Secretary reflect that in future decisions about taxation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, let me acknowledge something that Willie Rennie said. People are feeling the pressure of cost of living pressures. They feel their income isn't going as far with the cost of food, of utility bills, the mortgages, all of which is putting pressure on household income. So I recognise that. But the tax policies of this Government have raised important additional funding for public services. As I said in an earlier answer, we set out our position in the tax strategy of what we would want to see going forward. Of course, we will have to see what the UK Government budget brings next week, but we recognise the importance of people's household incomes, and we have taken measures to help sustain household incomes, and we will continue to do what we can in that spirit.
And at question number 8, I call Carol Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much it will allocate in its budget for the improvement of road safety on the A77 trunk road.
Cabinet Secretary.
So, since 2007, the Scottish Government has delivered 5 major A77 improvements totalling £64 million, including the £29 million Maybole bypass. In addition, approximately £425,000 is already budgeted for road safety work on the A77 this year, and we're working with local people through the South West Roads Focus Group and the A77 Campaign Group to develop recommendations for further targeted improvements on the A77.
Cara Mochan.
Thank you. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? The Cabinet Secretary does clearly know the concerns of local people regarding this road, and I do thank the Cabinet Secretary for Transport for meeting with community campaigners to hear their concerns. But given the key economic importance of the A77 to not only the south west of Scotland but the whole country, does she believe this figure is enough to significantly improve the problem so that we can see it as an economic benefit to the South West?
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, I'm pleased that Carol Mochan has recognised the engagement of the Cabinet Secretary for Transport with local people. I absolutely, and the Government recognises the strategic importance of the A77 to Scotland's economy. That is very much recognised, and we value the critical link it provides to the wider markets in the rest of the UK and Europe and to the wider trunk road network. Improvements to the A77 are one of the 45 recommendations included in the second Strategic Transport Projects Review, published in December 2022. And of course, the Government is committed to engaging with interested parties on strategic transport matters and in supporting the users of the A77. And I know that the Cabinet Secretary for Transport will continue to listen to the views of local people.
And supplementary, Sharon Dowie.
Presiding Officer. While I welcome any funding for these vital upgrades, we've just learned that this Scottish Government has increased its own staffing costs by £53 million in 2024-25. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell communities from Maybole to Kinryan why government bureaucracy can rise by tens of millions a year, yet the A77 still receives nowhere near the focused investment needed to make it safe?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I have just set out the investments that are being made in the A77, and of course there are major investments happening in other parts of the trunk road network. I'm sure the member will be aware that the Financial Sustainability Delivery Plan published in June alongside the Public Service Reform Strategy set out a very clear direction of travel for the reduction in staffing numbers, particularly in corporate costs. That shows that we very much recognise the importance of diverting as much funding as possible to frontline services, and that's what we will continue to do.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on finance and local government. And there will be a short pause, very short pause, to allow everybody to be in the position that they seek to be in, to proceed with the next item of business.